The scrawny mongrel watched her with cautious eyes as Teresa Anderson crumbled the last piece of hardtack into her palm, her stomach growling loud enough to shame her in the empty alley behind the saloon in Virginia City, Nevada. It was September 1878, and she had been in this mining town for 3 days with nothing but dust in her pockets and desperation in her heart. The dog approached slowly, ribs showing through matted fur, and behind it came 2 more strays, a skinny tabby cat and another dog missing part of its ear. "Come on then," Teresa whispered, her voice cracking from thirst and exhaustion. "I suppose we are all in the same predicament, are we not?" She divided the crumbs carefully, placing small piles on the ground as the animals crept forward. The hardtack had been her breakfast, lunch, and what should have been her dinner. Tomorrow there would be nothing. She had walked from Sacramento after her aunt died, leaving her with no family and no prospects. The journey had taken everything from her, including the small inheritance that had been stolen by a man she had trusted to guide her safely east. He had disappeared one night with her money, her horse, and even the locket that had belonged to her mother. The animals ate quickly, and Teresa felt a strange satisfaction watching them, even as her own belly cramped with hunger. At least something good had come from this terrible day. She leaned back against the weathered boards of the building and closed her eyes, wondering if she would wake up tomorrow morning or simply fade away into nothing during the night. Those animals would not think twice about leaving you if the situation were reversed. Teresa's eyes snapped open. A man stood at the mouth of the alley, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat that shadowed his face. He carried a burlap sack over one shoulder and regarded her with an expression she could not quite read. "Perhaps not," she replied, lifting her chin despite her circumstances. "But I am not an animal." The man stepped closer, and she could see his face now. He was perhaps 30 years old, with sun-bronzed skin, dark hair that curled slightly at his collar, and eyes the color of autumn chestnuts. A scar ran through his left eyebrow, giving him a dangerous appearance that made her pull her knees closer to her chest. "Lucas Donovan," he said, setting down his sack. "I own a ranch about 8 miles south of town. I came in for supplies." Teresa Anderson. She saw no point in lying. If he meant her harm, her name would make little difference. Lucas crouched down, bringing himself to her eye level. The dogs had scattered at his approach, but the cat remained, licking the last crumbs from the dirt. "When did you last eat a proper meal?" "I do not see how that concerns you, Mr. Donovan." "That means days," he said quietly. "You are starving." "I will find work tomorrow. Someone in town must need a seamstress or a cook, or there are 50 men for every job in Virginia City," Lucas interrupted. "And most of those jobs are in the mines, which you cannot do. The respectable positions for women were filled long ago by wives and daughters. The only work left is in the saloons, and you do not strike me as that type." Teresa felt tears prick her eyes but refused to let them fall. "Then what do you suggest, Mr. Donovan? I am open to practical advice." He studied her for a long moment, then stood and offered his hand. "Come work for me. I do not understand. My ranch needs help. My mother died 2 years ago and the house is falling apart. I can manage the cattle and the horses well enough, but I cannot cook worth a damn, and the place looks like a pack of wild animals' lives there instead of a man. I need someone to manage the household, prepare meals, and keep things in order. In exchange, you will have room and board, and I will pay you fair wages." Teresa stared at his outstretched hand. "You know nothing about me. I could be a thief or worse." "A thief would have kept those crumbs for herself," Lucas said. "Besides, anyone willing to give their last food to starving animals cannot be all bad. Are you coming or not? I want to get back before dark." She had no reason to trust this stranger, but she also had no other options. Teresa placed her hand in his, and he pulled her to her feet with surprising gentleness. Her legs wobbled, and he steadied her with a hand on her elbow. "When did you last drink water?" he asked. "This morning. There is a pump near the boarding house." Lucas shook his head and guided her toward the main street. "We will get you something to eat before we leave. You will be no good to me if you collapse on the way to the ranch." The restaurant he took her to was small but clean, and the proprietor greeted Lucas by name. Teresa tried to order modestly, but Lucas ignored her and requested a full meal with beef, potatoes, beans, bread, and coffee. When the food arrived, she had to restrain herself from devouring it like the strays in the alley. She forced herself to eat slowly, aware of Lucas watching her from across the table. "How did you end up in Virginia City?" he asked. Between bites, Teresa told him the truth. There seemed little point in deception now. She explained about her aunt's death, the small inheritance, her decision to travel east toward better opportunities, and the guide who had robbed her blind. "Did you report him to the law?" Lucas asked. "With what proof? He left me on the side of the road while I slept. By the time I woke, he was long gone. I walked the rest of the way here." She took a sip of coffee, savoring the warmth. "I suppose I should have known better. My aunt always said I was too trusting." "Your aunt was wrong," Lucas replied. "The fault lies with the man who betrayed that trust, not with you for offering it." Something in his tone made her look up, and she saw genuine anger in his eyes, though not directed at her. This man, she realized, had strong opinions about honor and fairness. It made her feel slightly less frightened about accompanying him to an isolated ranch. After she finished eating, Lucas purchased additional supplies and loaded them onto a wagon waiting outside the general store. He helped Teresa onto the bench seat, then climbed up beside her and took the reins. As they rolled out of Virginia City, she looked back at the rough mining town with its saloons and gambling halls, its desperate men seeking fortune in the earth. She did not think she would miss it. The journey to the ranch took nearly 2 hours. Lucas did not speak much, but he pointed out landmarks so she would know the way back to town if needed. The landscape was harsh and beautiful, all sagebrush and rocky hills with mountains rising in the distance. The September sun beat down mercilessly, and Teresa was grateful for the bonnet she still possessed, one of the few items the thief had not thought worth taking. When the ranch came into view, Teresa was surprised by its size. The main house was adobe and wood, sprawling and solid, with a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. Several outbuildings dotted the property, including a large barn, a stable, and what appeared to be a bunkhouse. Cattle grazed in distant pastures, and she could see horses in a corral near the barn. "How many hands do you employ?" she asked. "4 right now. Miguel, his son Carlos, Tom, and Henry, they mostly keep to the bunkhouse except for meals. Miguel's wife, Rosa, used to help with cooking, but her daughter in Carson City just had a baby, so she has been away for 2 months. The men have been making do with whatever they can throw together, and I think they are about ready to mutiny." Lucas pulled the wagon up to the main house and helped Teresa down. Up close, she could see the property's neglect. Weeds grew wild in what had once been a garden. Windows were filmed with dust. The porch steps needed repair. But the bones of the place were good, strong, clearly built by people who had intended it to last. "Let me show you inside," Lucas said, carrying the supplies. The interior matched the exterior. The furniture was well made but covered in dust. Dishes were piled in the kitchen. The floors needed scrubbing. But there was also evidence of a woman's touch from years past. Curtains, now faded, that someone had sewn with care. a rocking chair positioned to catch the light from a western window, dried flowers in a vase, long dead but not yet discarded. "Your mother?" Teresa asked, touching the flowers gently. "Yes, she loved this house. When my father died, everyone thought she would move to town, but she refused. She said she had put too much of herself into this place to abandon it." Lucas set down the supplies and removed his hat, running a hand through his hair. "I have tried to keep it up, but ranching takes all my time and energy. I know it is not what she would have wanted." Teresa turned in a slow circle, seeing not the dirt and disorder but the potential beneath. "Show me where I will sleep, and then I will need water for cleaning. If you want supper tonight, I will need to know what ingredients you have." Relief washed over Lucas's face. "You are certain you are up for work today? You were half dead an hour ago." "Food and water work miracles, Mr. Donovan. Besides, I have never been one to sit idle." That was not entirely true. She was exhausted down to her bones, but she also knew she needed to prove her worth quickly. This man had taken a chance on a stranger, and she would not give him reason to regret it. Lucas showed her to a bedroom that had clearly belonged to his mother. It was the cleanest room in the house, as if he had been unable to let it fall into the same neglect as the rest. A wedding ring quilt covered the bed. A dresser held a wash basin and pitcher. Lace curtains, yellowed but intact, hung at the window. "I cannot take your mother's room," Teresa protested. "She would want it used," Lucas said firmly. "The other bedrooms have been closed up for years." "This one is ready." He paused at the door. "I will bring in your things." "I have no things, Mr. Donovan. What I am wearing is all I possess." He frowned. "Then we will go to town again this week and get you some clothes and whatever else you need. Consider it part of your wages." Before she could argue, he left. Teresa sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself one moment of weakness. She put her face in her hands and felt the weight of the past weeks crash over her. But she permitted herself only that one moment. Then she stood, smoothed her filthy dress, and went to find cleaning supplies. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Lucas showed her the spring house where meat and other perishables were kept cool. He introduced her to the pantry, which was better stocked than she had expected, and explained that Miguel usually rode to town once a month for major supplies. Then he left her to her work and went to attend to ranch business. Teresa started with the kitchen. She heated water on the stove, washed the accumulated dishes, scrubbed the surfaces until they gleamed. She found potatoes, onions, and salted pork, and started a stew that would feed multiple hungry men. While it simmered, she swept the floors throughout the house, raising clouds of dust that made her cough. She was beating a rug on the front porch when the ranch hands returned. 4 men on horseback appeared over a rise, and she straightened nervously as they approached. Lucas emerged from the barn and said something to them she could not hear. The men looked toward the house with undisguised curiosity. "Miss Anderson," Lucas called, "come meet the crew." Teresa set aside the rug beater and walked across the yard, very aware of how she must look, covered in dust and sweat, her hair falling from its pins, her dress nearly in tatters. The oldest of the 4 men swung down from his horse and removed his hat. He had gray streaking his black hair and a weathered face that spoke of decades under the sun. "Miguel Reyes, señorita. This is my son Carlos." He indicated a younger man, perhaps 25, with his father's features and a shy smile. "Tom Patterson," said a lanky man with red hair and freckles who could not have been more than 20. "Henry Wu," said the 4th man, who was older than Tom but younger than Carlos. He had Chinese features and regarded her with cautious reserve. "Teresa Anderson," she replied. "I have stew on the stove if you are hungry. It should be ready within the hour." "Stew?" Miguel's face lit up. Real stew, not beans from a can. Real stew, Teresa confirmed. Though I must warn you, I am working with unfamiliar ingredients in an unfamiliar kitchen. It may not be my best effort. Anything is better than what we have been eating, Tom said fervently. No offense, boss. Lucas held up his hands. None taken. I know I cannot cook. The men took care of their horses and headed to the bunkhouse to wash up. Lucas lingered in the yard with Teresa. They are good men, he said. Miguel has been with my family since I was a boy. Carlos grew up on this ranch. Tom is young, but he works hard and learns quickly. Henry is the newest. He was working in the mines but hated it. He is better with horses than anyone I have ever seen. You treat them well, Teresa observed. I can tell by the way they speak to you. My father always said that loyalty must be earned, not demanded. These men work hard for me because I work hard alongside them. That is how it should be. He glanced toward the house. Thank you for today. I know you are exhausted. I will manage, Teresa said. Besides, I needed to keep busy. If I had stopped to think, I might have panicked about this entire arrangement. Are you panicking now? She considered the question honestly. No. Strangely, I feel more at peace than I have in months. Perhaps it is simply relief at not wondering where my next meal will come from. Perhaps, Lucas agreed. Or perhaps it is this place. My mother always said the ranch had a way of settling people, of making them feel like they belonged. Did you always want to be a rancher? It is all I have ever known. My grandfather started this ranch in 1845. My father expanded it. Now it is mine to maintain. He looked out over the land with an expression of deep satisfaction. I cannot imagine doing anything else. The dinner bell hanging near the kitchen door caught Teresa's eye. Shall I ring that when the meal is ready? Yes, that will bring them running. Lucas smiled, and it transformed his face, erasing the hard lines and making him look younger. I should warn you, they will eat like locusts. Make plenty. Teresa returned to the kitchen and checked her stew. She had found canned tomatoes in the pantry and added them along with herbs she discovered growing wild near the springhouse. The smell was promising. She baked biscuits using what little remained of the flour supply, making a note to add it to the next town list. Then she set the large dining table, finding dishes and utensils that clearly had not been used in months. When she rang the bell, the men appeared with gratifying speed. They filed into the dining room, eyes widening at the set table and the pots of food. Lucas took the head of the table and gestured for Teresa to sit at the opposite end. I am the housekeeper, she protested. Surely I should serve and then eat in the kitchen. You are part of this household, Lucas said firmly. You eat with us. Teresa sat, feeling self-conscious as the men filled their plates. The first taste brought silence, then Miguel spoke rapid Spanish that needed no translation. This is wonderful, Miss Anderson, Carlos said. We have not eaten this well in months. Rosa is a fine cook, Miguel added quickly, but she has been gone too long. And the boss, he tries, but I cannot cook, Lucas finished. We have established this. The men laughed, and Teresa felt some of her tension ease. They were rough but kind, these ranch hands. They asked her polite questions about where she came from and how she ended up in Nevada. She gave abbreviated answers, not wanting to dwell on sad topics during the meal. After dinner, the hands returned to the bunkhouse while Lucas helped Teresa clear the table. You do not need to do that, she said. My mother would come back from the grave if I left all the work to you on your first day. He carried a stack of dishes to the kitchen. Besides, it gives us a chance to discuss the arrangement. Teresa's stomach clenched. Is something wrong? No, not at all. I simply want to ensure we are clear on expectations. You will manage the household, which includes cooking, cleaning, laundry, and tending the garden if you can revive it. In exchange, you have your room, all meals, and $30 a month. Every Sunday is yours to do as you wish, though I understand if you need rest more than recreation. Does this sound fair? $30 a month was more than generous for domestic work. Teresa had expected half that. It sounds very fair, Mr. Donovan. Then we have an agreement. He extended his hand and she shook it, noticing the calluses and the strength in his grip. One more thing. Please call me Lucas. Mr. Donovan makes me feel like my father. Lucas, she repeated. Then you should call me Teresa. Teresa. The way he said her name, with a slight softness on the second syllable, sent an unexpected warmth through her. She busied herself with the dishes to hide her reaction. That night, lying in the comfortable bed in a room that still smelled faintly of lavender, Teresa stared at the ceiling and tried to process the dramatic turn her life had taken. This morning she had been starving in an alley. Tonight she had a position, a purpose, and a place to sleep. It seemed too good to be true, and she waited for the other boot to drop. But as days turned into weeks, no disaster materialized. Instead, Teresa fell into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. She woke before dawn to prepare breakfast for the hands. After they rode out for the day's work, she tackled the overwhelming task of restoring the house to proper order. Room by room, she cleaned and organized, finding treasures along the way. A music box that played a tinkling waltz, photograph albums showing Lucas's family through the generations, his mother's recipe book with notes written in a careful hand. Lucas often worked near the house in the early evenings, and they fell into the habit of talking as Teresa prepared supper. She learned that his father had died in an accident with a spooked horse when Lucas was 19. His mother had lived another 9 years before a fever took her. He had no siblings. The ranch was his entire world. Did you never want to marry? Teresa asked one evening in early October as she kneaded bread dough. Lucas, who was mending a bridle at the kitchen table, paused in his work. I was engaged once. Her name was Elizabeth. But she decided ranch life was too hard and too lonely. She married a shopkeeper in Carson City instead. He resumed his stitching. That was 5 years ago. I suppose I threw myself into the ranch after that and forgot to look up. I am sorry. Do not be. She made the right choice for herself. We would have made each other miserable. He glanced up. What about you? No beau left behind in Sacramento. No, my aunt was sickly for years. I spent my time caring for her rather than courting. Teresa shaped the dough into loaves. There was a young man once who seemed interested, but he disappeared when he learned I had no dowry to speak of. Then he was a fool. The certainty in Lucas's voice made her heart skip. She changed the subject quickly. Miguel mentioned that you have a herd you will be driving to the railroad in November. Yes, it is our main income for the year. We have 200 head ready to go. It is a hard drive, 3 weeks there and back, but necessary. Will all the hands go? Miguel, Carlos, and I will go. Tom and Henry will stay to watch the ranch and the remaining stock. He set aside the mended bridle. I know it will be difficult managing without us for 3 weeks. I will be fine. Tom and Henry are easy to cook for, and the garden will be nearly finished by then anyway. Lucas nodded but looked troubled. I do not like leaving you here with so few men. If anyone from town came looking for trouble, Lucas, I am perfectly capable of defending myself. And besides, who would bother us? We are miles from anywhere. He did not argue further, but Teresa noticed that before he left on the drive in early November, he made sure she knew where he kept his extra rifles and showed her how to shoot if she did not already know. She assured him she had learned as a girl and was a decent shot. This seemed to ease his mind slightly. The morning they left, Teresa stood on the porch and watched the men drive the cattle north toward the railroad. Lucas turned in his saddle and raised a hand in farewell. She waved back, surprised by how empty the ranch felt without his presence. The 3 weeks passed slowly. Tom and Henry were polite but quiet, eating their meals quickly and returning to work without lingering. Teresa threw herself into projects, making new curtains for the parlor, reorganizing the pantry, and preserving the last of the vegetables from the garden. In the evenings, she read books from the shelf in Lucas's study, learning about cattle breeding and Nevada history. She also made a discovery that charmed her. Behind the house, in an overgrown corner near the springhouse, she found the strays. Not the same ones from Virginia City, but 3 thin dogs and several cats who clearly had made the ranch their territory. Teresa began setting out scraps for them, and gradually they grew brave enough to approach while she was present. "You have a kind heart," Henry observed one morning when he came to the kitchen door and saw her surrounded by the animals. "They were here first," Teresa replied. "It seems only fair to share." When Lucas, Miguel, and Carlos returned in late November, they brought good news. The cattle had sold well, and Lucas had negotiated an excellent price. The ranch was financially secure for another year. That night, Teresa prepared a feast to celebrate, using supplies she had ordered specially from town. Lucas seemed different when he returned. He watched her more, lingered in the kitchen longer, asked her opinion on matters beyond household management. Teresa told herself not to read too much into it. He was simply being kind to his employee. December brought cold winds and occasional snow. Teresa insisted on making preparations for Christmas, even though Lucas claimed he had not celebrated in years. She baked cookies using his mother's recipes, strung popcorn for garlands, and convinced Tom to cut a small pine tree that she decorated with paper ornaments she crafted in the evenings. On Christmas morning, she woke to find a package on the kitchen table. Inside was fabric, beautiful calico in shades of blue that matched her eyes, along with thread, needles, and buttons. Lucas appeared in the doorway, looking uncertain. "I thought you could make yourself some new dresses." "You have been making do with hand-me-downs from town." Teresa touched the fabric reverently. It had been so long since anyone had given her a gift, especially one chosen with such care. "Lucas, this is too much." "It is not nearly enough. Teresa, you have transformed this place. You have made it feel like a home again. I wanted you to know how much that means to me." She looked up and found him watching her with an expression that made her breath catch. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Miguel's voice called from outside, breaking the spell, and Lucas turned away. But something had shifted between them, and they both knew it. Winter deepened, and the ranch settled into the slower pace of cold months. The cattle stayed in closer pastures. The hands spent more time repairing equipment and buildings. Teresa finished her new dresses and began sewing shirts for Lucas, having noticed that his were all worn thin at the elbows and collars. They spent more evenings together now. After supper, while the hands retreated to the bunkhouse, Lucas would remain in the house. Sometimes they played cards. Sometimes they simply talked while Teresa mended and Lucas worked on ranch accounts. The easy companionship they had developed deepened into something neither of them acknowledged aloud. One evening in January, a blizzard struck with unexpected fury. Teresa was in the kitchen preparing supper when Lucas burst through the door, covered in snow. "The hands are secure in the bunkhouse," he reported, brushing off his coat. "But we will not be able to check on the cattle until this clears. Miguel said it should blow through by morning." "Then we will make the best of it," Teresa said calmly, though her heart raced at the thought of being essentially alone with Lucas for an entire evening. "I have stew ready, and there is wood enough for the fire." They ate in the kitchen, which was warmer than the dining room. Outside, the wind howled and snow piled against the windows. Inside, the lamplight cast everything in warm gold. "Does this remind you of growing up here?" Teresa asked. "Being snowbound. My mother would make it an adventure. She would pop corn and tell stories and make sure we were never frightened of the storm." Lucas smiled at the memory. "My father would pretend to be worried, but you could tell he loved those evenings too. They were an excuse to forget about work and just be together." "They sound like they loved each other very much." "They did. My father used to say that finding my mother was the best day of his life, and every day since was a close second." His eyes met hers across the table. "I used to think he was exaggerating. Now I am beginning to understand what he meant." Teresa's pulse quickened. "Lucas, I know I should not speak," he interrupted. "You are my employee and I have no right to presume anything." "But Teresa, these past months with you here, watching you bring life back to this house, sitting across from you every evening, I have found myself thinking thoughts I have no business thinking." "What kind of thoughts?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. Lucas stood and moved around the table, then knelt beside her chair so they were at eye level. "Thoughts about what it would be like to come home to you not as my housekeeper but as my wife. Thoughts about growing old in this house together, filling these rooms with children and laughter. Thoughts about kissing you, which I have wanted to do since that first day in Virginia City when you gave your last food to those strays." Teresa's eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was imagining it, the way you look at me sometimes. I told myself it was wishful thinking. Wishful thinking." Lucas reached up and gently wiped a tear from her cheek. "Teresa, are you saying—" "I am saying that I have fallen in love with you, Lucas Donovan, deeply and completely, but I was afraid to hope you felt the same." The joy that lit his face was answer enough, but he spoke anyway. "I love you. I think I have loved you since I found you in that alley, so fierce and proud even when you had nothing. You are the strongest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever known." He kissed her then, gentle at first, then deeper as she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back with all the emotion she had been holding inside for months. The storm raged outside, but neither of them noticed, lost in the moment they had both been waiting for without realizing it. When they finally broke apart, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me, please. I know this is sudden and I should do this properly with a ring and—" "Yes," Teresa interrupted. "Yes, I will marry you. I do not need a ring or a speech, I just need you." They held each other as the fire crackled and the snow continued to fall. Teresa thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment. The loss, the hardship, the desperate night in Virginia City. If someone had told her then that within months she would be engaged to a good man, sitting in a home she loved, she would not have believed it. But here she was, and it was real. "When?" Lucas asked. "When can we marry? I do not want to wait long." "Spring," Teresa suggested. "That gives us time to plan and for you to write to any family or friends you want present." "I have no family left and my friends are all here on the ranch. We could marry tomorrow if you wished." Teresa laughed. "Let us compromise. March, perhaps. After the worst of winter but before the busy season begins." "March," Lucas agreed. "I will ride to town tomorrow, weather permitting, and speak to the minister." They stayed up late into the night, making plans and dreaming aloud about their future. Lucas showed her the master bedroom that had been his parents', closed up since his mother's death, and asked if she would be comfortable making it theirs. Teresa assured him she would. They discussed children, both wanting several. They talked about improving the ranch, adding on to the house, perhaps hiring more help so Lucas would not have to work quite so brutally hard. In the morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world covered in sparkling white. When Lucas told the hands about the engagement, they reacted with enthusiasm that warmed Teresa's heart. Miguel clasped Lucas's shoulder and spoke in rapid Spanish that sounded like blessings. Carlos grinned and said he had known since Christmas. Tom and Henry offered congratulations and teased Lucas good-naturedly about finally doing something smart. The next weeks passed in a flurry of preparation. Lucas did ride to town and arranged for the minister to come to the ranch in March. Teresa sewed herself a wedding dress using more of the beautiful blue fabric, staying up late by lamplight to get the stitches perfect. Lucas built new furniture for their bedroom, pouring his feelings into every joint and curve. News of the wedding spread, and on the appointed day in late March, more people arrived than Teresa had expected. Neighboring ranchers came with their families. Townspeople who knew Lucas made the journey. Miguel's wife, Rosa, returned with her daughter and grandchild. The house filled with voices and laughter, and Teresa thought how happy Lucas's mother would be to see her home alive again. The ceremony took place in the parlor, which Teresa had decorated with early spring flowers she had found blooming near the creek. She wore her blue dress and carried a simple bouquet. Lucas wore a new suit he had purchased in town, though he clearly felt uncomfortable in anything other than work clothes. But when Teresa appeared at the top of the stairs and began descending, Lucas's expression made every moment of preparation worthwhile. He looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in the world, and she knew she would carry that look in her memory forever. The minister spoke about love and commitment, about the sanctity of marriage and the building of a life together. Teresa barely heard the words. She was too focused on Lucas, on the feel of his hand holding hers, on the promises they were making to each other. "I do," Lucas said when asked if he would take Teresa as his wife. "I do," Teresa echoed, her voice strong and sure when the minister pronounced them husband and wife. Lucas kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to more eyes than just theirs. The gathered witnesses erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening. Rosa and the neighboring ranch wives had prepared a feast. Someone brought a fiddle, and there was dancing in the cleared parlor. Miguel toasted the couple in Spanish and English, saying that he had watched Lucas grow from a boy to a man, and he had never seen him happier than at this moment. "To Lucas and Teresa," Miguel said, raising his glass. "May their love be as enduring as this land, and may they know many years of joy together." As the sun set and guests began departing, Teresa stood on the porch with Lucas's arm around her waist, waving farewell. When the last wagon disappeared over the rise, they were finally alone. "Shall we go inside, Mrs. Donovan?" Lucas asked. "Mrs. Donovan." Teresa smiled at the sound of it. "Yes, I think we shall." Their wedding night was everything she had hoped, tender, passionate, and filled with whispered words of love. Lucas treated her with a reverence that made her feel cherished beyond measure. Afterward, lying in his arms in the bed that had belonged to his parents, Teresa felt a sense of rightness settle over her. "What are you thinking?" Lucas asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I am thinking about how strange life is. How one moment you can be at your absolute lowest and the next, everything changes. If I had not been in that alley feeding those strays, if you had not come along at precisely that moment, I might have died there." "Do not think about that," Lucas said, pulling her closer. "You are here now, and you are mine, and I am never letting you go." "I am also thinking," Teresa continued, "about those animals, about how giving away those crumbs felt like the end of everything, but it was actually the beginning. It brought you to me." "Your compassion brought me to you," Lucas corrected. "I have known plenty of people in this world, Teresa. Most would have kept those crumbs for themselves and no one would have blamed them, but you gave them away. That told me everything I needed to know about who you are." They fell asleep wrapped in each other, and when Teresa woke in the morning to find Lucas watching her with love in his eyes, she knew she had finally found home. The months that followed were the happiest Teresa had ever known. She and Lucas fell into a comfortable rhythm of married life. She managed the household and helped with ranch decisions when asked. He worked hard but always made time for her, coming in from the fields for lunch rather than eating with the hands, spending evenings in her company rather than working until he collapsed. In May, Teresa began to suspect she might be pregnant. By June, she was certain. When she told Lucas, he picked her up and spun her around, whooping with joy. "Careful," she laughed. "You will make me dizzy." "A baby," Lucas said, setting her down gently. "We are going to have a baby." "When?" "Early February, I think. Right around your birthday." His smile could have lit the entire territory. "Best birthday present I could ask for." He became even more protective, insisting she rest more and do less heavy work. Teresa endured his fussing with good humor, knowing it came from love. As her belly grew through summer and fall, Lucas would place his hand on it each night, feeling for kicks, talking to their child in a soft voice that never failed to move her. "You want a son or a daughter?" Teresa asked one evening. "I do not care as long as the baby and you are healthy," Lucas replied. "Though I will admit, a son to help with the ranch would be useful." "And if we have a daughter, she could learn ranching too," Teresa pointed out. "Your mother managed well enough before you were born." "True enough. My mother could outride and outshoot most men." He kissed Teresa's temple. "If we have a daughter like you or my mother, I will be a fortunate man." They spent the winter preparing. Lucas built a cradle in the barn, working on it during slow afternoon when the ranch work was caught up. Teresa sewed tiny clothes and blankets, her heart full at the thought of the child who would wear them. The hands were excited too, with Miguel already planning to teach the baby Spanish and Carlos offering to carve toys. Teresa went into labor on a cold February morning, 2 days after Lucas's 30th birthday. Rosa had come to stay for the last month of the pregnancy, and she took charge immediately, sending Carlos for the doctor in town and Miguel to keep Lucas from wearing a hole in the floor with his pacing. The labor was long and difficult. As the hours stretched and Teresa's pain grew, Lucas became desperate. He stayed by her side despite Rosa's protests that men did not belong in birthing rooms, holding Teresa's hand and whispering encouragement. "You are the strongest person I know," he told her. "You can do this." "I am beginning to doubt that," Teresa gasped as another contraction seized her. But finally, as the sun was setting, their son was born. The doctor placed the squalling infant in Teresa's arms, and she looked down at the red, wrinkled face with overwhelming love. "He is perfect," Lucas said, tears running unashamedly down his face. "Teresa, you are amazing. He is perfect." They named him Daniel after Lucas's father. Little Danny was a hungry, healthy baby who kept them both awake for weeks, but neither parent minded. Lucas would walk the floor with him in the middle of the night, singing soft songs his own father had sung to him. Teresa would watch them together and feel her heart might burst from happiness. As Danny grew, it became clear he had inherited his father's dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. He was curious about everything, crawling early and getting into constant mischief. The ranch hands doted on him, with Miguel declaring him the finest baby in all of Nevada. When Danny was 18 months old, Teresa discovered she was pregnant again. This time, Lucas was more prepared, though no less excited. Their daughter, Sarah, was born in November 1881, 2 days before Thanksgiving. She was smaller than Danny had been, but just as determined, making her presence known with lusty cries. "Now we have one of each," Lucas said, holding his daughter with the same wonder he had shown with his son. "Our family is complete." But Teresa shook her head, smiling, Give it time. I suspect we are not done yet." She was right. Over the next 8 years, 3 more children joined the family. Another son they named James, born in 1883, twin daughters, Ruth and Rose, born in 1885, and finally, in 1889, their youngest son, William. The house rang with children's voices. The rooms that had been so empty and sad when Teresa first arrived now overflowed with life. Lucas expanded the house twice, adding bedrooms and a larger kitchen. The ranch prospered too, growing as Lucas and Miguel worked to improve the herd and the land. Teresa often thought about that night in Virginia City, about the strays and the crumbs and the desperate hope that had led her to give away her last food. She thought about how Lucas had appeared like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. And she thought about the life they had built together, better than anything she could have imagined. The strays still came to the ranch. There always seemed to be a thin dog or a wandering cat that found its way to their door. Teresa fed them all, and Lucas never complained, even when they ended up with 10 dogs and 15 cats. The children played with the animals, gentle as their mother had taught them to be, and the creatures became part of the family's daily life. On their 10th wedding anniversary in March 1889, Lucas gave Teresa a locket that had belonged to his mother. Inside, he had placed a photograph of their family, the 2 of them with their 6 children, taken by a traveling photographer the previous summer. "I want you to carry us with you always," Lucas said as he fastened it around her neck. "The way you have carried us in your heart since the beginning." "You make it sound like I did something special," Teresa said. "All I did was love you." "That is everything," Lucas replied. "That is the most special thing in the world. Teresa, do you remember what I said the night I proposed? That I wanted to grow old with you in this house, filling it with children and laughter. I remember. We have done that. We have built something beautiful together. And I want you to know that every single day I thank God that I found you in that alley. You have given me everything I never knew I needed." Teresa kissed him, tasting salt from tears she did not realize she had shed. "And you saved my life, literally and in every way that matters." "I love you, Lucas. I will love you until my last breath." They stood on the porch that evening, watching the sun set over the land they had built a life on. Their children played in the yard, chasing dogs and cats and each other. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and peaceful. And Teresa thought about how far she had come from that desperate woman in Virginia City, who had given her last crumbs to starving animals. She had been feeding strays when Lucas found her. He had fed them all and her too, giving her not just food but a home, a purpose, and a love that had grown into this beautiful, chaotic, perfect life. She had been at the end of everything, and he had shown her it was actually a beginning. "What are you thinking about?" Lucas asked, his arm around her waist. "About compassion," Teresa said. "About how small acts of kindness can change everything. About how we never know which moment will be the one that alters our entire path. Deep thoughts for a Sunday evening." "I suppose I am feeling philosophical in my old age," Teresa teased. She was 31, hardly old, but Lucas played along. "Ancient," he agreed. "Practically decrepit. Shall I help you to your rocking chair, grandmother?" She swatted his arm and he caught her hand, bringing it to his lips. The gesture was easy, automatic, born of 10 years of such moments. Danny called from the yard that dinner must be ready soon because he was starving. Sarah wanted to know if she could keep the kitten she had found by the barn. James was arguing with the twins about something incomprehensible. William toddled over and raised his arms to be picked up. Lucas scooped up his youngest son while Teresa went to investigate the kitten situation. As she walked across the yard, surrounded by children and animals and the land she had come to love as much as Lucas did, Teresa sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. She had been broken when she arrived here, reduced to nothing, desperate enough to give her last food to creatures who could not thank her. But that desperate act had revealed who she was to the one man who mattered. Lucas had seen her compassion and recognized it as valuable, as something worth saving. He had fed her body and soul, giving her everything she needed to become who she was meant to be. And together, they had created this life, this family, this home. "Mama," Sarah called. "The kitten is purring. Can we keep it, please?" Teresa looked at the tiny orange tabby in her daughter's arms, skinny and ragged and clearly needing care. She thought about the strays in Virginia City, about the pattern that had repeated throughout her life, drawing her to creatures who needed help. "Of course we can keep it," Teresa said. "What is one more mouth to feed?" Sarah squealed with delight and ran off to show her brothers and sisters. Lucas appeared at Teresa's elbow, William still in his arms. "We are going to end up with every stray animal in the territory," he said, but there was affection in his voice, not complaint. "Probably," Teresa agreed. "Does that bother you, not even slightly? This ranch has room for them all, just like our hearts have room for however many children we end up with and whatever creatures you decide to adopt." He shifted William to his other hip. "Besides, how can I object? One of those strays led me to you." "I was not a stray," Teresa protested. "Were you not? Lost, alone, with nowhere to go and no one to care for you." Lucas's voice was gentle. "You were the most important stray I ever found, and I am grateful every day that I was there at the right moment." Teresa leaned against him, careful not to squish William, who was falling asleep against his father's shoulder. "We found each other," she said. "That is what matters." As the stars began appearing in the darkening sky, the Donovan family made their way inside for supper. The table was crowded and loud, with 6 children all talking at once and 2 parents trying to maintain some semblance of order. The dogs waited hopefully for dropped food. The cats twined around chair legs. The house was full and warm and alive. Later, after the children were finally asleep and the dishes were washed and the house was quiet, Lucas and Teresa sat together in the parlor. He worked on mending a halter while she embroidered a sampler one of the twins had requested. The fire crackled peacefully. "Do you ever wish things had been different?" Teresa asked suddenly. "That you had met me some other way under better circumstances?" Lucas looked up from his work, considering the question seriously. "No, I believe we met exactly as we were meant to. If circumstances had been different, we might have been different people. You might not have been feeding those strays. I might have walked past without stopping. Everything happened exactly as it needed to happen for us to end up here. Even the bad parts. Losing my aunt, being robbed, nearly starving. Those things were terrible, and I hate that you suffered them," Lucas said carefully. "But they brought you to that alley on that specific day. They shaped you into the woman who would give her last crumbs to hungry animals. And that woman is who I fell in love with. So yes, even the bad parts. They were all part of the path that led you to me." Teresa set aside her embroidery and moved to sit beside him on the settee. Lucas put his arm around her, and she rested her head on his shoulder. "I used to be so angry," she said quietly. "Angry at my circumstances, at the world, at God for taking everyone I loved. But now I see that I was being brought here to you, to this life. All of it had purpose. And I was waiting for you," Lucas replied. "I just did not know it until I saw you in that alley, fierce and proud and so impossibly kind. That was the moment my life really began." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the sounds of the house settling around them. Upstairs, one of the children murmured in sleep. Outside, an owl called. The wind whispered through the eaves. "Tell me about tomorrow," Teresa said. It was a game they played sometimes, planning the next day together. Tomorrow, Miguel and I will check on the new calves in the south pasture. Carlos wants to work with that roan colt he has been training. Tom and Henry will repair the fence line by the creek. Lucas paused. And you will manage this household full of wild creatures, both human and animal, with your usual grace. I was thinking I might start teaching Sarah to bake. She has been asking. She will love that. She wants to be just like her mother. And Danny wants to be just like his father. I saw him trying to ride that old mare yesterday, sitting in the saddle exactly the way you do. Lucas smiled. He is a good boy, they all are. We are very fortunate. Yes, Teresa agreed softly. We are. The years continued to pass, bringing changes and challenges as all years do. The children grew. Danny became Lucas's right hand on the ranch, learning everything his father could teach him. Sarah developed her mother's gift for making a house a home. James showed a talent for working with horses that rivaled even Henry's skill. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and getting into mischief together. William, the baby, was spoiled by everyone but remained sweet-natured despite the attention. The ranch continued to prosper. Lucas expanded their holdings, purchasing adjacent land when it became available. They hired more hands as the work increased. Miguel eventually retired, though he stayed on the property in a small house Lucas built for him and Rosa. Carlos took over as foreman, proving as capable as his father. Teresa became known throughout the region for her kindness. She took in not just stray animals but also people who needed help. A widow whose husband had died in a mining accident, a young couple down on their luck, a Chinese family fleeing persecution in Virginia City. The ranch became a place where people knew they would find compassion and assistance. You cannot save everyone, Lucas said one evening after Teresa had arranged for yet another family to stay in their bunkhouse temporarily. Perhaps not, Teresa replied. But I can save the ones who come to my door, just as you saved me. Lucas could not argue with that logic, especially since he was equally unable to turn away those in need. Together, they created a legacy of generosity that their children absorbed and carried forward. On their 20th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Danny, now 21 and courting a rancher's daughter from the next county, gave a toast. "To my parents," he said, raising his glass, "who taught us that strength means helping those who cannot help themselves. That prosperity means sharing what we have. And that love means showing up every day and choosing each other over and over. May we all be half as good at living as you two are." Teresa cried, and Lucas's eyes were suspiciously bright. Later, when the party had wound down and they were alone again, Teresa said, "Do you think we did it right, raising them?" "Look at them," Lucas replied. "Really look. Danny is honest and hardworking. Sarah is compassionate and wise. James is gentle with animals and people. The twins are full of life and joy. William is curious and brave. We did better than right, Teresa. We did wonderfully." "We did it together," she corrected. "I could not have raised them without you. We were a team from the start. That is what marriage is meant to be." More years passed. The children married and started their own families. Danny took over more of the daily ranch management as Lucas slowed down, though he never fully retired. Sarah married a doctor and moved to Carson City, but visited often with her children. James started his own horse breeding operation on a portion of the ranch Lucas deeded to him. The twins married brothers, causing endless confusion at family gatherings, and stayed close by. William went to university back east, but returned to practice law in Virginia City, determined to help people who faced the injustices his parents had spent their lives fighting. Through it all, Lucas and Teresa remained the center, the foundation everything else was built on. They were grandparents now, then great-grandparents. Their hair went gray, then white. Their bodies slowed, but the love between them never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger with each passing year, deepened by shared experience and accumulated memories. On a spring day in 1914, Lucas and Teresa sat on the porch where they had spent countless evenings. They were both in their 70s now, and the ranch was run primarily by their children and grandchildren. But they still lived in the house where they had built their life, surrounded by photographs and mementos of their years together. 35 years, Teresa said, looking at the ring on her finger. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I know what you mean. Lucas took her hand, his grip still strong despite the arthritis that plagued his fingers. Teresa, do you have any regrets? She turned to him, surprised. Regrets? Lucas, no, not one. How could I regret the life we have built? I just want to be sure. You gave up a lot to marry me. A life in town, perhaps an easier existence. I have worked you hard all these years. I gave up nothing that mattered and gained everything that does, Teresa said firmly. Lucas Donovan, you are the best thing that ever happened to me. This ranch, our children, our life together, it is all more than I ever dreamed of having. If I could go back and change anything, I would not change a single moment. Not even the hard parts. The year the drought nearly broke us, losing babies before they were born. The times I was short-tempered and difficult, not even those. They were part of the journey. They taught us and shaped us and made us appreciate the good times more. She squeezed his hand. Besides, I was short-tempered and difficult plenty of times too. You never held it against me. Lucas laughed, then grew serious. I meant what I said 35 years ago. Every day with you has been a gift. I would not trade our life for anything in this world. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. In the distance, they could see some of their grandchildren playing in the yard, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Dogs and cats, descendants of the strays Teresa had always taken in, lounged in the shade. You remember the first time we sat here together? Teresa asked. The night after I brought you home from Virginia City. You were embarrassed about being covered in dust from cleaning. I thought you looked beautiful. You never told me that. I was trying to be proper. You were my employee. Lucas smiled at the memory. Though I believe I was already half in love with you by then. And I with you, though I would not admit it even to myself. Teresa leaned her head on his shoulder the way she had done thousands of times before. Thank you, Lucas, for stopping in that alley, for seeing past my circumstances to who I was, for feeding those strays and me, for building this life with me. Thank you for feeding those strays in the first place, Lucas replied softly. Thank you for being the woman who would give her last crumbs to hungry animals. That is who you are, Teresa. That is who you have always been. And it is one of the 1,000 reasons I love you. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they remained on the porch, holding hands as they had for 35 years. Their story had begun with an act of compassion in a dirty alley. A woman at her lowest point choosing kindness over self-preservation, and a man who had recognized the beauty in that choice. From those desperate moments had grown a love that spanned decades, a family that spread across the region, and a legacy of compassion that would continue for generations. Teresa had been feeding strays her last crumbs when Lucas found her. He had fed them all and her too, giving her not just sustenance but a home, a purpose, and a love that had sustained them both through every joy and sorrow life brought. And in the end, that was everything. That was the story Teresa would carry with her forever. The tale of two people who found each other at exactly the right moment, who chose each other every day afterward, and who built something beautiful from the ruins of one woman's desperate circumstances. Lucas and Teresa lived several more years, long enough to see great-grandchildren and to know their legacy was secure. When Lucas passed peacefully in his sleep at 78, Teresa held his hand and told him she would see him again soon. She followed him 6 months later, surrounded by children and grandchildren who loved her and would carry forward the lessons she and Lucas had taught. They were buried side by side on the ranch, under a spreading oak tree that had been a sapling when they first married. The headstone reads simply, "Lucas and Teresa Donovan, beloved by all they fed, both body and soul." The ranch continued to thrive under Danny's stewardship, then his children's, then his grandchildren's. The house was always full of family, and there were always stray animals being fed and cared for. The tradition Teresa had started that desperate day in Virginia City lived on, a reminder that compassion costs little but can change everything. Years later, when Danny was an old man himself, he would tell his great-grandchildren about his parents. He would tell them about a woman so kind she gave her last food to starving animals, and a man so wise he recognized that kindness as precious. He would tell them about love that lasted a lifetime, about building a family on a foundation of compassion and hard work, about the importance of helping those who could not help themselves. And the children would listen, learning the lessons their great-great-grandparents had lived, carrying forward the legacy of that day in 1878 when everything changed because a desperate woman chose kindness, and a compassionate rancher chose her. The story of Lucas and Teresa Donovan became part of the ranch's history, passed down through generations. It became a reminder that we never know which moment will be the one that changes everything, which act of kindness will be the one that saves us. It became proof that love can grow from the darkest circumstances and flourish into something beautiful and lasting. And somewhere, in whatever comes after, Teresa and Lucas were together still, watching over the land they had loved and the family they had built, content in the knowledge that their story had ended exactly as it should, with love, with family, and with the certainty that they had lived well and loved better. Their beginning had been desperate and uncertain, but their ending was peaceful and sure, surrounded by the fruits of their shared life. It was, in every way that mattered, a perfect story. It was their story, and it was complete.